Welcome to the Holiness Today podcast. On this episode, I have a conversation with Keith Cox, General Treasurer for the Church of the Nazarene. In this conversation, Keith shares how God has called him to serve, what his work for the church entails, and where you should go to get barbecue if you happen to visit Kansas City. Well, Keith Cox, thanks for being on the Holiness Today podcast. You were elected to the General Treasurer position in 2016, I believe.
That's right.
For those who may not know you as well, you're also a Kansas City Chiefs super fan,
Yeah, that's
Kansas City
exactly.
Royals super fan, and first winner of the Global Ministry Center's Fantasy Football League. You are the inaugural Lombardi Trophy holder of that league. So
And I finished either last or second to last in every season after that. So
you set it out. So the Keith Cox Trophy, in your name. So
my star blew out
also,
early.
yeah, also a pretty excellent pickleball player, I've heard.
Well, I do okay. Pickleball is a lot of fun. I just played last night, and it's a great sport. It's kind of new to me about 4 years ago. And as you get older, it's just something that the different generations can play and different genders can play on the same team. And so it's kind of an equalizer, I guess. We have young guys, we have old guys, and everywhere in between. So it's a lot of fun.
I've heard you're competitive in the most sanctified way possible, I think is how
I
it was
do like
described to me. So.
competition. My wife tries to get me to walk, for exercise. I'm like, that's just too boring. We can't keep score. I need to do something where I'm keeping score.
Keep up with
So
it.
that's
So
right.
feel free to go into as much detail as you like, but how did God call you into the finance ministry? You started out working in banks, I believe, is how you started out in the financial ministry, but how did God pull you into the position you are in now?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a former banker. I was in the banking industry from my junior year in college all the way until 2016, and actually at the same place for that long. So I was at the
Oh,
same place
wow.
for 4 years and kind of did everything there is to do from the accounting and finance side initially. And so I was just an accountant out of school and then became the controller for a while and then the CFO for a while. And then the last 15 years, I was the president of the bank and our holding company. And so I was doing more operational stuff than financial stuff. But it was really interesting story to me anyway. I know that there's a lot of former bankers that have served as general treasurer. In fact, it seems like it's a classic spot for bankers to fill. And I know I don't know that all my predecessors were bankers, but I know two or three of them were. And so it's interesting that somehow that's a good fit, I think, for a general treasurer spot. But I knew my predecessor, Marilyn McCool, because we served on the Jesus Film Board together, and we had worked really hard to uh, correct what was going on in the banking industry in the 2008 2009 kind of real estate bubble and banking crisis, and just real honestly, we had just worked our tails off to kind of get back in the good graces of our regulators, and the good graces, make sure that had plenty of profit. And so I was just tired. We spent about 6 years really kind of redoing our bank. And it's a local bank in Kansas City. We had about 12 branches and managed about 2 billion in deposits, or 2 billion in assets. But just really tired at the end of it. And I was just praying that, Lord, maybe I need to retire or go do something else, or I was just praying about that. But I had heard that Dr. Marilyn McCool was planning to retire, and that kind of caught my attention. But I said, Lord, I'm gonna let you tell me if that's the right thing. I'm not gonna present my name or call anybody about this. I want to know if that's your will. And so if it is, you tell me. And it was probably a week later. I knew Marilyn, but we didn't talk very often outside of the board meetings, outside of the Jesus Film board meetings. But my phone rang and I looked over and it said Marilyn McCool on the caller ID. And so she said, well, you're going to think I'm crazy calling you, but would you allow me to put your name forward in a group of folks that they're considering to follow me as general treasurer? And I said, well, I don't think you're crazy at all, because I've been praying about something like this, and the fact that you contacted me without me contacting you is evidence that I think I really feel the Lord calling me to this. And so that's kind of how that all came about, and it was really confirmation for me that the Lord kind of had this for me to do next in life. And I've enjoyed it. It's there's a lot of challenges, daily challenges. I always feel like I I never feel like I've got anything handled. I guess I always say, Lord, you're going to have to help me today. You're going to have to show me, how we get stuff done
Yeah.
today, how we manage this thing, because it is a complex organization, and from a finance standpoint, it's really complex. And so he's faithful. I think that's where he wants us, though. He wants us to rest in him and rely on him. And if we ever feel like we've got something by the tail and we've figured something out on our own merits, he'll probably move us somewhere else where we feel out of our comfort zone. And but he has sustained me throughout this whole process, and throughout the 8 years that I've been here, and he's sustained us as a denomination. I see his mercies new every day in what we're doing.
And you grew up in the Church of Nazarene, am I understand that correctly? So
Yeah, I did.
a
In fact,
lifelong Nazarene.
my mom, I guess, it's interesting. I thought I was a third generation Nazarene. My mom's father was a Nazarene pastor. And one day I happened to be looking at something in our record books. And I just happened to pull out a district journal from the District of Missouri from the 1940s. And I looked up and I saw where my grandfather was ordained. And then I saw uh, a another lady's name with his same surname that was attending those that were praying over him. And so I said, Mom, who is this? Who is this? Do you know this name? She goes, yeah, that's my grandmother, which is my great grandmother. And I did not know, but I kind of searched back through the records that she was ordained. And so
Wow.
she was ordained in Eldon, Missouri, back in the early 1930s. So it was kind of cool to figure out that I had no idea, in that she even attended the Nazarene Church.
Yeah.
She was an ordained elder in the Church of the Nazarene. So I guess I'm a fourth generation
Fourth
Nazarene.
generation.
Um,
And always lived in the Kansas City area. Is that my
I
understanding?
have, I have. My mom actually moved here from St. Louis, where her dad was a Nazarene pastor, and when she was had graduated from high school, and she actually worked for the what would have been the Nazarene Missions International Department, was called NWMS, Nazarene
Yeah.
World Mission Society. And so she worked as an admin in the NWMS department in the late 50s and very early 60s. So that's how she was here. I've not seen anything with her name on it yet, but uh, that's how we ended up in Kansas City.
We'll have to check in the archives and see if we can check with Ryan and see if we can find something down there.
There you go. There you go.
So, I'm sure that, you can give the level of complexity that you wish, but just for me and for our listeners, what does the role of the general treasurer look like? What's a
Well,
day in the life?
yeah, it varies. It really varies. But we have uh, 6 regional offices, and there are regional finance coordinators that essentially have a solid line through the global missions director, and then a dotted line to the general treasurer. Just because my role does encompass all that we've got going on in the regional offices, and then of course there are 37 field offices that report up through those regional offices. We actually consolidate all the financial records of the regional offices into our financial books. And so we've got one system that we can look all the way through to the field level. We don't consolidate the 37 fields into our books, but we do consolidate the 6 regional offices into our books, as well as wholly owned subsidiaries like the Foundry, or used to be Nazarene Publishing House, but now they're using the name the Foundry. the Church of the Nazarene Foundation, and the Jesus Film Harvest Partners. Those are all separate subsidiary corporations that feed up into our books. And so I'm responsible for the accounting and finance functions globally. And then also we've got a donor services department, which handles all of the transactions that come through, all the donations that come through that we're extremely grateful for everyone, not only from churches, but also from individuals. If they're giving through just a designated gift or a project gift, those all come through our donor services department. And then our stewardship department kind of reports up through the general treasurer's office as well. And so Jeff Kunzelman, the director of stewardship, and a lot of people would have talked to Kevin Coker, who is handles a lot of the transactional questions for people that are using the Funding the Mission software. And so that reports up through the general treasurer's office. We do have a director of Nazarene Benefits USA and Nazarene Benefits International, and it's Kevin Gilmore. And I work with him closely, and I'm on all the boards of our subsidiary organizations, but I work with Kevin closely, and I wouldn't necessarily say that he reports up through us, but he has access to the general board through the general treasurer's office. And the same is true for the Church of the Nazarene Foundation. Dr. Mark Lale runs the Church of the Nazarene Foundation. He's the president of that, and he has access to the general board through the general treasurer's office.
So quite a complex matrix that you're dealing with there. So some are dotted lines and some are directly to you, it sounds like.
It is very much a matrix organization. It's not hierarchical. I'm used to a hierarchical organization, kind of a top-down approach. But this is, there's a lot of democracy here. And certainly, I feel like I report to the Board of General Superintendents. I report to the General Board. I report to basically every church member, and essentially I have 4,000 or 5,000 bosses. But it works well. It works well for our church.
Yeah. So how frequently do you meet with international regional leaders financially? Is that quarterly, pretty frequently, or?
Well, we try to at least annually, and we leverage technology as much as possible. So from time to time, I'll visit a regional office, but it's really kind of pretty rare. We can use, like we're doing now, use a Zoom conference, and we're really grateful for technology that really kind of blossomed throughout the pandemic, in 2020, 2022. And so, but yeah, we can meet via screen. It is a challenge because of the different time zones. I think our Singapore office is plus 15 hours. The Eurasia office is plus 7 or 8, depending on whether we have daylight savings time, and the Africa office is plus 7 or 8. The only ones that is easier to get a hold of is South America and Meso regional offices, because they're closer to our time zone. But we're a global organization, and that means that we have to use technology, have to leverage technology, and have to be ready and able to speak to folks whenever is doable for both their schedule and ours.
So when you started, going back, what do you think the biggest challenge was you were facing, or maybe are still facing? But what was that moment where you're like, I got to try and settle this or figure this out?
Understanding the organization. We're very complex, and like I, there were many challenges in the banking world, but I feel like the structure of our organization is much more complex than that was. We're governed by the manual, the Church of the Nazarene manual. We're governed by a general board policy handbook. We're governed by internal policies. And so there's just a lot to our organization, and fully understanding it does just take a while.
We'll be right back with the rest of this episode. But did you know you can receive credit for listening to Holiness Today podcast? Holiness Today podcast episodes qualify for lifelong learning with the Church of the Nazarene. To register for lifelong learning, simply go to learning.nazarene.org. The Lifelong Learning Registry provides Nazarene ministers the opportunity to record and report their efforts to develop and maintain a pattern of lifelong learning to enhance the ministry to which God has called them. Every Nazarene minister is encouraged to engage in a variety of lifelong learning activities. The code for Holiness Today podcast is 64627 and will also be listed in the show notes. This code can be utilized for this episode and any previous episode you wish to listen to. Thank you for being a listener and sharing in the ministry of the Church of the Nazarene. Now back to the rest of your episode. So, I mean, there's probably several, but is there one, not big challenge, but area that you're focusing on now for the Church of the Nazarene where you're like, this is something we want to see expand or be figured out in the next few years? What's your big area of focus? Everything, but can you boil it down to one?
Well, I think just figuring out how we are able to fund what all the Lord's calling us to do. In business school, they had a definition for economics, and I remember the definition was uh, satisfying unlimited needs and wants using limited resources. And so, our needs and wants and what we desire to do is unlimited, but we're trying to figure out what the priority is with these limited resources. And I think we are a thriving denomination, yet there are growth pains, and we feel like the Lord is calling us to spread the gospel throughout the entire earth, and figuring out what the priorities in doing that, and figuring out how we're able to fund that going forward is really probably our biggest challenge.
One thing you and I talked about, this was probably back during COVID because it was coming out of COVID, but was thinking through at the local church level how to kind of emphasize the giving of worship, giving as a part of worship. You're very involved in the local church, but how is your involvement in the local church help you be a better general treasurer? If you could share a little bit.
Well, like you said, I've always been involved in the local church. I've always had a sense that the Lord, it's the Lord's money, not only mine, or not only what He's given me, but what He's given the church. We have a sign outside of our department that says it's God's money, and we need to be good stewards of that. And I think just involvement in the local church has helped me to get a sense that we all are stewarding the resources that He's given us. And I think the more that we get that figured out, the more He'll bless us, and bless us monetarily, but also just bless us in life in order to be able to ensure that we're stewarding His resources the way He would have us to do that. You had mentioned, I think, one time, and we talked about this in the pandemic too, I think, about how giving is really a part of worship. It really is worshipful. And I know, back in the day, back in the old days, there would be an offering and an offertory. Someone would play a song while they're doing that, and it sort of evolved to where a lot of places are, hey, there's a plate in the back, or there's a box in the back, we'll stick some money in there. And I think there should be different ways that we're able to give. In fact, electronically is one. People give electronically. It's very popular and it's very needed in the local church, but somehow still making it feel like an act of worship. And I was even encouraging people in the pandemic days. I know my parents would still give to church, but they were older and they didn't want to be exposed to the virus because they knew that they were more at risk being older. And so they would drive down to our local church, and we go to the same church, and they would put their money in the box or whatever during the week. And I said, if you want to make that, that's great, but if you want to make that more worshipful, kick on some worship tunes as you're going. As you're driving over there, pray about stuff and worship with some worship tunes, make it feel like an act of worship, even though it's kind of a 21st century way to give, either electronically or in the back. I would also encourage any local churches that would feel led to do so to make the offering time in a worship service significant. And I've heard other people say that a lot of times there was one pastor I heard of in Florida that would always lead lead giving time with a story of impact, and say, here's a story of impact that's going on that I wanted to let you know about. Thank you for giving, and I think that can really help to bolster the resources of the local church.
Have you found in your experience in traveling that there's coming out of COVID that's coming back, or has it kind of stayed in the back of the? I mean, I've noticed churches bringing it back as a part of service, but do you still feel like that became a part of the pattern of their worship service, and they still haven't moved the passing of the plate back into the service? I mean, again, I know, as you said this, I'm guilty of giving online, but the church I attend, we still kind of have music playing and the passing of the plate during it. But there's still something that, it makes me think, even though I gave online this week, this is that part of the service.
Well, I'm guilty of that too. I think a lot of people we're now using donor advised funds from either our foundation or the National Christian Foundation or some other place. And a lot of times they'll just have the funds sent from a donor advised fund electronically to the church. And that is very necessary. That's a necessary way to do things. It's a very 21st century way. But like you're saying, to still emphasize that some churches are having little things in the pews, little pieces of paper in the pews that they can write and it say, I'm giving online, and still put that in the plate as their act of worship. So they're actually extending their arm to put that in the plate. That's a good idea too, I think, for people to do that. But again, I think yeah, I don't know. I've seen it both ways. I still see some that are using in the back. I was privileged to be in one of our districts in South Africa just a couple 3 weeks ago, and they had baskets that they put at the front of the church, and people would march up and put their offering in during that time. That's a beautiful way to express worship in giving. And so I just encourage as many people, as many local churches as would, to bring that back as an act of worship, and also encourage people to find maybe an alternate way to make it worshipful, even if it is electronic or with a box or something like that.
So you mentioned being very involved in the local church, but you're also if I remember correctly, a Sunday school teacher, regular Sunday school teacher. So how long
Yeah,
have you been doing that?
oh, probably about 15 or 18 years. I consider myself a Sunday school leader. I don't know that anything, because I think I probably learned as much as anything. We have a very discussion oriented class. And I've often said, if nobody's going to discuss any of this, then it's only going to be 5 minutes, because, I just don't have that much to say. But try to come up with thought-provoking questions that kind of guide the class through, and then count on several of ours, especially people that like to speak out. There's some that don't care for that, and that's totally fine too. But it is more of a discussion process, and I think that bodes well. It really helps everybody else to learn from everybody else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a question I'm asked, and I'm sure I answer it poorly. I try and answer it well, but you are the expert in answering this question. But what is the World Evangelism Fund, and what does it do? I've heard that
Yeah,
question a few times. I'm sure you
yeah,
get that question quite a bit. So,
we do, and
Keith, where's
it's
all this
really
money going?
exactly. It's not really just a fund. It really is the lifeblood of everything we do as a church. And honestly, there are probably a lot of Nazarenes in a local church that don't realize that they're a part of a global organization whose mission is to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. And I think we've adopted that as our mission statement. We've had that for many years, and really that kind of says it all. Whatever we do, we want to make Christ-like disciples in the nations. Well, there's a lot of ways we do that through education, through evangelism, through you know, meeting together. One of the things, for example, we do is a General Assembly. We try to do that every 4 years and basically invite the church family, the global church family, to a gathering. There's business that occurs through the General Assembly. They actually are doing business through part of it, but it's very worshipful, and there's a lot of worship to it. It's a good time to just interact with our global family, and but we feel like that connectedness is necessary part of what there was. I think it was Dr. Frank Moore when I first came was talking about going to school at Vanderbilt for one of his doctorates, I think he said, and it was a theology class, and he said that the professor was asking people what denominations they were from, and of course Frank said he was from the Nazarene denomination, and I recall that he said the professor said, "Oh, don't stop meeting together." He said because whatever denomination the professor belonged to, they had kind of abandoned the meeting together as a people. And it really it meant that there wasn't a lot of synchronization of minds, building of thought, and it became very fragmented because they hadn't met together. And so I took that to heart, and even though it is part of our World Evangelism Fund goes to help put on a General Assembly and other meetings, it's important that we meet together as a body of believers, as a family of Nazarenes. And so that's one of the things. Obviously, administrative functions. I've got a staff of people they're funded by the World Evangelism Fund that accept the donations and basically, I consider it somewhat like a roller coaster. And so if you this analogy came to my mind. I'm not sure if it works perfectly, but I used to like to ride roller coasters when I was younger at theme parks. And if you ever notice, whether it's a metal or wooden roller coaster or whatever, you see the cars go through on the track, and you'll see the shaking of the pillars that are holding the track up. And I always kind of, I said, man, I sure hope that pillar is in concrete really well, because that as that train goes through, you can just kind of see the whole thing shaking. But I almost see like the world evangelism giving is sort of the track and the support beams that hold up everything we do. The cool stuff, the evangelism, the education, all those things that are kind of on the delivery edge are sort of the roller coaster car that runs on those tracks. But the World Evangelism Fund is the lifeblood of everything we do. It's really what supports our whole organization. And so it's critical to what we've got to making Christ-like disciples in the nations. And so I think those main general categories we do the World Evangelism Giving does fund the work of about 450 missionaries globally. Some of them are considered global missionaries, and some of them are considered sponsored missionaries. Global missionaries are more career-long missionaries. Sponsored usually have a time of 2 to 3 years that they're working with the intent of then staying longer if they need to. But the sponsored missionaries raise most of their support, while the global missionaries, although they do raise funds for deputation accounts, which the deputation funds those ancillary things that are beyond what the World Evangelism Fund can fund. But even those sponsored missionaries that are raising their own support funds are supported by the World Evangelism Fund, in that we have training, we have oversight, we have support that goes for their kids. There's housing, those kind of things that are provided to those sponsored missionaries, even though they're raising their quote unquote salary support over and above the World Evangelism Fund. So it's a really critical thing that we do. It's really the envy of other denominations. and the fact that we do have world evangelism giving. That's more of a storehouse type giving. We've had several denominations say, wow, we wish we could provide that kind of support for what we're doing globally through a storehouse type giving model.
So really, I mean, I like the way you said it, the lifeblood. I mean, it's really the means by which we kind of do everything in the Church of the Nazarene. But along with that, in your role, and this is probably the unfun part of your role, so share as little as you want on this or as much as you like, but you also kind of have to be involved in the transparency and accountability, the audits of where that money's going. What does that look like? You shared a little bit about that at the outset, but that happens yearly. If my understanding correctly, we bring in auditors and they look at our books, but what's that like on your end?
It does. We're audited every year by actually our current auditors are Forvis Mazars. It's an international company, very big. They are very astute at providing audits, financial audits. And so it's a full-blown audit where they're ensuring that all that we do is in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles in the U.S. Like I said, we do fold in the regional offices, and the five non-USA regional offices have individual audits themselves from those countries. And so Forvis does some testing at our regional office sites in addition to what that audit is. So this is part of our commitment to the Evangelical Council on Financial Accountability, the ECFA. They're a Christian organization that gives, for lack of a better word, a good housekeeping seal of approval from finances and transparency. And we have achieved that good housekeeping seal of approval from the ECFA. But part of that is to maintain transparency and to make sure that we've got an audit every year. And again, like I said, it's a major corporation. In fact, when I came from banking, I used the firm that had become Forvis as well. It used to be called BKD, and they were, mostly a USA corporation. When they merged with Mazars, they became sort of international. But yeah, it's a firm that's really well known, probably one of the 5 or 6 largest firms in the world as far as accounting and finance goes. But they audit all of our subsidiaries as well. So they do an audit on Nazarene Benefits, do an audit on the Church of Nazarene Foundation, on the Foundry. Jesus Film is part of this as well. So everything is audited each year, and we want to make sure we maintain ultimate transparency and accountability.
So, at what point in your life did you kind of know you wanted to go into finance? Was that something you were always interested in? Did you have an economist, like Milton Friedman or someone that you looked up to or anything like that? Or tell us how God grew that in your heart.
I don't know. I studied at Mid-America. I didn't study a lot. I should say. I studied accounting at Mid-America, and then started working at the bank that I worked at here in Kansas City for 34 years. Ended up going back to business school at a Jesuit school here that's here in Kansas City, and so we got an MBA from Rockhurst University here in Kansas City. But kind of, I don't know. I'm not sure how that really occurred. I felt like I was good at it. I excelled at accounting and finance. And my dad was an accountant. And so, he had instilled in me some good practices for internal control and those kind of things. And I suppose it just became in it. I don't know if there's any point in time where I had set out to do a certain thing, kind of just the Lord leading from point to point.
So, if you weren't in the role that you're in today, what other area do you think God could have called you to, or you would have liked to do?
Really enjoy I really enjoy sociology and sort of kind of cultural, from a cultural context. And I've always even before coming here, I had led work and witness trips or mission trips from our local church probably 15 or 18 of them before I even came here. And just seeing other cultures very was very attractive to me, and seeing and trying to understand about other cultures has really been a passion. I think that's probably why I enjoy working here so much. And I don't get to do it all the time because a lot of times you know, behind the finance desk and not really, but at the times that I do get to get out, I really enjoy seeing and experiencing other cultures. And so it's kind of cool that that's a small part of it here, because it's something that I really enjoy.
So what's the most memorable, since you've been working at the Church of Nazarene, places maybe you traveled to or something that sticks out to you of you wish you would have had more time spending there to learn the culture, to learn the geography and whatnot? It's probably too
Well,
many to choose, but
yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've fairly got a lot of experience in Latin America because of before coming here, because I think in leading work and witness trips, usually uh, mission trips from an American's perspective, it's so easy to get into the similar time zones. So if you fly south, you're not. It's not going to take 2 days to get there and 2 days to get back. So I had been made just one or two trips to Africa before I came here, but I enjoyed seeing Burundi before I came here, and after coming here, Kenya and South Africa, and some of those uh, Mozambique, some of those places. I don't know that anyone in particular sticks out. I just really enjoy seeing different cultures and trying to understand how that culture impacts behavior and that.
so if someone was traveling to Kansas City for a week, not for work, all expenses paid, what would your itinerary be for them? What would
Well,
they
the
need to
Chiefs
do in
game for
Kansas City?
sure. The
Yeah,
Chiefs game for sure. You gotta see Arrowhead, and
right.
so. But I don't get to go very often. Every once in a while, if there's a Sunday night game or something, we can get out to it. But it's quite an experience. A barbecue, absolutely. I don't know how many barbecue restaurants we have, probably in the hundreds, but there are a few. I kind of have uh,
Do you
one
have a
place I
favorite?
like. Well, one place I like for ribs, one place I like for beef, one place I like for pulled pork, another place for fries, another place for barbecue beans. And so my perfect barbecue meal would be a mix of about 6 or 8 different types of barbecue, because they have these guys have the best ribs, these guys have the best pork, these guys have the best beef. So, but yeah, Kansas
What
City
what
barbecue.
barbecue place would be a hidden gem as a local? Like, we hear the big ones like Arthur Bryant's, Jack Stack, For you as a native, if someone was coming to say, give me a barbecue name that maybe no one has ever heard of, that hasn't lived in Kansas City.
Rosedale Barbecue's got some pretty good pulled pork. It's just one location down on Southwest Boulevard, and it's called Rosedale. There's also a place that's fairly new called Meet Mitch, Meet, or no, it's Meat instead of Meat Mitch. And so a guy named Mitch started it, and I think George Brett is an investor in it. They have one location down here in South Kansas City and one at the new Kansas City International Airport. But they have a sandwich on big Texas toast that's burnt in grilled cheese sandwich. And the time we went there, I like whenever we go to a new barbecue place, I like to get a hodgepodge different things and try the ribs, try the beef, try the pork. So I'd gotten kind of a hodgepodge, and my wife had gotten this burn-in grilled cheese sandwich. And so she goes, "Man, you need to take a bite of this." I said, "Man, look at all this stuff that I've gotten." Yeah. She goes, "Just take a bite of this." So I did. It's the best thing I've ever had in my mouth. And so every time we go, it's a big sandwich, so we split it. And and I think they've actually taken off the menu, but for some reason, but we actually met Mitch one time, and he was in the restaurant, and he said, "Yeah, I used to do that for my kids when they were growing up, and they loved it." And I said, "Well, it's just we can't get enough of it." And so, but I think they maybe took off the menu, but we always ask. We said, "Can we get a burn-in, grilled cheese sandwich?" And he said, "Yeah, I'll get that for you." So they still do it if you ask.
Did you grow up on the Kansas side or Missouri side?
I grew up on the Kansas side, on the southwest side of Kansas City. Lived in Overland Park and went to high school called Shawnee Mission West on the west side, southwest side of Kansas City, and then of course Mid-America. But I worked almost my whole career on the Missouri side. And I was actually born in Missouri until my parents brought me home. They lived in Kansas, but I was born in a hospital down by the Country Club Plaza in Kansas City. And so my wife's from Columbia, Missouri, and you may or may not know that there's a lot of competition between the University of Kansas and Lawrence, Kansas, and the University of Missouri and Columbia, Missouri. In fact, I think they're going to play in basketball on Sunday for the first time in many years. But it kind of it goes back to the Civil War because Missouri and Kansas were on opposite sides of the Civil War, and they were coming across the border and raiding each other. And I like to say that it started with the Civil War and then got worse from there till we are today because
Didn't
now
improve.
it's all about sports. And if you can't be a Kansas fan and a Missouri fan at the same time.
Oh, I found out recently over by the seminary that the largest battle west of the Mississippi, I think, was over in really kind of where the zoo, close to the zoo, I think, is where it's at. But
That's probably right. And there's a big cemetery. There's a Civil War cemetery on that side too, that
yeah,
has a lot of people buried in there from the war. And there was actually in Lawrence, Kansas, where the University of Kansas is just about 30 minutes west of here. There was the Missouri guys came across and in the Civil War days or before the Civil War and actually burnt it to the ground. And
Burnt
so
Lawrence. Yeah,
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 so that you could see it from up in the hills. You could see it burning, and so there's a lot of animosity between Kansas and Missouri. But
yeah.
I still married a Missourian anyway, I guess.
You've settled that a little bit, at least in your household.
Right.
And you have two daughters,
Yes, right. Two adult daughters. Neither one are married, so we're not sure if we'll ever get grandkids. But
grandkids. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
our oldest one just lived in New York for about the last 5 years and just moved back. She still works for a company in New York remotely, but she kind of was missing home and just moved back, so we get to see her more often now. The other one lives on the west side of town too.
and she had a pretty good view of the city, if I remember correctly. I think you showed me a picture of what she was able to see
She
from
did.
her.
She lived in Jersey City, about a mile or so west of New York City, but she was on the 60th floor overlooking the World Trade Center. So that was
Yeah.
I think it was a cool view. It was expensive. And so I think that's part of her motivation for moving back, that it just was time to pay a little less in rent. And rent kind of skyrockets in that part of town. So
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was a
for
cool
sure.
view.
Good for a season in New York, but maybe not long term. Huh?
Right. That's exactly right.
And this is just Keith trivia that I'm trying to recall here, but you're a motorcyclist. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, I did. I rode for about 25 years, and it's my wife Julie was never interested in riding. I would had two or three guys from the bank that I worked at that we would all take off and go riding a weekend down in Arkansas, and so we really had a good time doing that. I'm getting older now, so my Julie, my wife, just she said, I really would like for you to get rid of that bike at your age. There's just not enough protection around it. So I wouldn't say I was happy to do so, but I certainly could acquiesce to that. I enjoyed riding for a long time and have a lot of good memories of being able to do that.
So that's where pickleball came in. It's replaced
Right.
motorcycling, is that?
Had to have something to replace it. That's exactly right.
Now, you don't have to share the story, but I was told when I was interviewing by Bonnie, she goes, you have to ask Keith about his pickleball testimony with some guys you were playing with. But
Yeah, I'll share a little bit. I think it was just an opportunity to view an activity as a way to live Christ in front of folks that don't know him so well. And we started this group together. Some of the guys are from church, some of the guys were from here at the Global Ministry Center, and it's a hodgepodge of guys from either other churches or from people coming in from secular jobs. And we ended up with about 20 guys, a nucleus of about 20 guys. Most of them I didn't know before we started playing pickleball together, but I consider them really good friends now, after playing once or twice a week pickleball over 4 years. And Mark Bain, who's our director of evangelism, was in our office uh, a year or so, or a year or two ago, and had a lady with him that has a basketball church, and she gathers people together in Florida. And I wish I could remember her name, but I remember the time that I met her. She was talking about, and Mark Bain was talking about how she had gathered these guys together to play basketball, and that it had become kind of a church for them. It's centered around this activity. And Mark said, "Well, what do you do?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I play pickleball and stuff." And he kind of expressed to him how we had a group of guys, some of them Christian, but some of them would be more cultural Christians, not necessarily disciples. If you ask them, they say, "Yeah, I'm Christian," but they would say it more like, "I'm Italian," or "I'm, I'm German," or something like that, more cultural Christian. And so I was telling him that, how we were trying to live out Christ for them, because they said, "You have a pickleball church." And I said, "Well, not really. Yeah, you have a pickleball church." And so they were kind of adamant of the fact that we had a pickleball church. So we decided, not every time, but as things would happen to people in the group, and that there was a guy that got COVID and was actually in the hospital. I don't think he had a respirator on, but he was really, really ill. And one of our guys from the church that I go to, the Nile Avenue Nazarene, said, "Let's just pray for this guy." And so we gathered everybody around and said, "Would you guys feel comfortable if we just prayed for," his name was Rob, "if we prayed for Rob for Lord's healing over him?" And you could, of course, there were some guys, "Oh yeah," and there were a few other guys, more the cultural Christians, that kind of were hanging back, and kind of, what's this all about, And so my friend prayed for Rob, and we kind of go out for pizza afterwards a lot of times. And one of the more cultural Christian guys said, "Wow, that prayer was just awesome." That, he was really taken aback by what we would consider in the church a fairly regular prayer.
Yeah.
And so I could tell that he was really kind of taken aback by that. So we decided to, when things happen, we would stop and pray about guys' families, pray about, whatever. And more, the cultural Christians became more comfortable with us doing that. And there's one guy in particular that I would really call a cultural Christian at the time, that has sort of, and I don't know really when it happened. They talk in the Bible talks about Paul planting and Apollos watering and somebody else harvesting. We all have kind of a role, and the Lord takes care of all that. I don't know if this really happened, but in talking to him more recently, he is a true disciple of Christ. He's because of some health issues and us praying for him, he has really turned his life over to, and he said point blank, I found this lady that I've been dating, and I just told her up front, I'm not going another step without Christ in my life. So you just got to know before we even get serious about dating that's where I am, and I need someone who will have the same prioritizing Christ in their life the same way that the Lord's asking me to. And I'm just like, wow. And I had one of our guys here in the GMC who I missed one of the weeks, and one of the guys here at the GMC came into my office, and the guy I'm talking about, he named him my name. And he said, "What did you do with?" And he named him, and he goes, "Well," I said, "What do you mean?" And he says, "Well, he had asked me what was going on. I told him about some stuff, some challenges I was having." And he stopped right in the middle of pickleball and put his hand on me. He said, "Can I put my hand on you and pray for you right now?" And this is the
Wow.
guy that was a cultural
Yeah.
Christian.
Yeah.
And
That's neat. Yeah.
he's acting. I mean, he really is a disciple of Christ now. So we didn't really have anything to do with that. The Holy Spirit just did it. But I think it's just a matter of living out your life, lifting up Christ. And the scripture says, "If I'm lifted up, I'll draw all men to myself." And, there's still some of the guys that I would consider still are cultural Christians. In fact, One of them told me that his father-in-law passed away, and I texted him this morning. Hey, I'm going to be praying uh, comfort and peace over you and your family and your wife's family, your wife, as you deal with this passing of. And he said something back, said, "Oh man, you don't know how much that means to me." So I think it's just a matter of using those opportunities to live out Christ in front of folks, and then the Holy Spirit takes care of all the rest. He'll draw people to Himself when we lift Him up.
So maybe not a pickleball church, but a pickleball ministry
Yeah, for
that
sure.
that individuals from several churches are involved in. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, it's not certainly not me, and it's more, I'm not the leader of the group or anything like that, but one of my close friends and my accountability partners that I go to church with, there was something happened a couple weeks ago when we were playing, and they brought in a ambulance because I don't know if somebody had twisted a knee or was having some heart issues or whatever. But they brought in an ambulance that kind of carted her off on a gurney. And so we just finished playing, and we have about 3 courts that we rent. We've got 16 or 18 guys that kind of rotate around playing. And my friend, my accountability partner said, "Hey, let's pray for this lady. I don't know who she is. Let's just all pray for her." And
Hmm.
yeah, it really makes a difference as
Yeah.
we lift it up in front of
Yeah.
those not only our Christian friends, but the cultural Christians as well.
Well, Keith, I'm going to completely pivot on you, but I sourced a question from Sarah McGee at the Global Ministry Center. I
Okay.
told her I was interviewing Keith Cox, and she goes, "I got a question for him." So get ready for this one. She's guessed what your answer will be, so we'll see if we're close.
Okay.
If you had to sing a song for karaoke, what song would that be?
Wow. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Um, boy, um,
Do you ever sing karaoke? Have you sung karaoke before?
I
Maybe I
have
should start with
not.
that.
I have not. We used to sing quite a bit. There were a couple of friends of mine when we were younger. We had a trio, kind of when that was popular back in church, and so we had a trio
Yeah.
that would do some stuff, and we sing at our local church. And then there's a television station here that used to be run by Youth for Christ, and they would invite us down to do some on camera stuff, singing and stuff, and so I try to think what I would sing. I don't know. Karaoke. I'm a Motown fan growing
Okay.
up. I
Yeah.
grew up in that era. So, anything Earth, Wind and Fire or the Commodores or something
Yeah.
like that, from a
Yeah.
secular standpoint. Uh, Michael Jackson,
Yeah.
we went to, my daughter was still in New York this last summer, and so we went to see her, and we got tickets to go see MJ, which is the musical about Michael Jackson. It was interesting, and so all those songs were right in my wheelhouse, and so I don't know, it'd be something Motown probably, I guess.
So another, I'm just gonna do some popcorn random questions real quick for you. What's your favorite movie?
Oh, probably Field of Dreams or something like that. Although I wish they had cast some of them a little bit. I complain because I really like baseball, and I don't know if you remember the movie at the end. He was playing catch with his dad, and they found an actor that I think had never thrown a ball in his entire life. He was supposed to be a major league player, coming from the cornfield, and you tell by the way he was throwing, he had never thrown a ball as he was an actor and never thrown a ball. Kevin Costner looked very natural. Right. But that always irritates me when they miscast people. They cast them more for their acting ability than their athletic ability.
I feel like Hoosiers. Remember the movie Hoosiers?
Oh
I feel
yeah,
like some
sure.
of those guys weren't the best basketball players when you watched them on camera, but they were supposed to be,
Right.
Some of them were, but some of them it's like I don't think he would be able to play in this game. But
That's right.
that's funny. All right, favorite dessert?
Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Chocolate mint. Chip chocolate mint.
Okay. Favorite book that you recommend to people to read? You have a book that you go to and you say, "Hey, this is a good one."
Um, I like to read series books from the secular standpoint. I used to read a lot of the oh Michael Connolly books. Uh, But as far as trying to think, one of the books that it's actually been a while since I read it, but I really like, I'm not just sucking up here, but I really like Scott Daniels' book, Embracing Exile. And I think I would highly recommend that. I feel like there are many similarities, I think, to what we have in this country right now compared to the Israelites living in exile. And so I really like that thought of, hey, look, we're in exile, let's embrace it. And how do we live out Christ in exile? Because we're not in this world.
So on that note, what Bible character, person, or maybe that you identify with the most, or is your personal hero, or you find yourself relating to?
Daniel. And the reason I say that is because um, in working in banking, of course, I ended up having opportunities to pray for people when, and again, my former pastor, Ken Lightcap, taught me to say, hey, if somebody's got something going on, just ask them if you can pray for them. He said, I've never had anybody tell me no, no matter who they are. They say if they've got something really going on with their life, they'll embrace somebody praying for them. So even in the bank that I worked at, especially the executive offices, they were more like family than they were coworkers. And so, I just got a chance to pray for uh, other people, and I think I'm kind of going off subject here, but I think one of the other things that is most meaningful to cultural Christians when we as Christians apologize for something we've done wrong. There's times when I think I had the most impact for Christ saying, hey, you know what? I'm sorry. I said this or I acted this way, and it really wasn't how I want to act because I want to exemplify Christ in the way that I act and speak and forgive me. And I think sometimes being vulnerable like that can be the biggest witness to cultural Christians or non-Christians in the secular world. But um, back to the question. Now I've almost forgotten the question.
Daniel. So you said you relate to
Yeah,
Daniel the most.
Daniel. The reason I liked Daniel is because his impact in living in exile, just lifting up Christ in front of others, had a huge impact on Nebuchadnezzar and King Darius or Darius, however you say it, when he was serving them, and to the point where they were saying, "Praise be to the God of Daniel." And it's almost like they didn't know the one true living God themselves, but they just knew it when they saw it. We're saying this Daniel guy is worshiping the one true living God. May praise go to the God of Daniel. And I always wanted, um, and I wish I had lived this out better over my life, but I always wanted people to be able to say, hey, praise be to the God of Keith, just because um, of lifting you up in front of others. And I wish I could say I lived that out perfectly, and I haven't. I, I think that's the ultimate for somebody to say, praise be to the God of Nate,
Yeah.
as I saw God living out in.
No, that's an excellent because it's always that I've talked to Mark Bain about that in the past, and Mark Bain does a really good job of kind of discipling, discipleship first model before evangelism, but just those small little things like how can I pray for you? How can I help you? How can I bless you? Is usually a good entrance point to having those deeper conversations. Because I think you're right, at least in Kansas City, you growing up here, there is a lot of cultural Christians. It's actually very difficult to find someone who's not, not at least at some point touched the church in one way or the other, but there's a lot of those. But I like that praying for others is kind of an entrance point publicly. So that's great. Well, big question for you, but as you're praying for the Church of the Nazarene, what are you praying about? What can our listeners be praying about? What do you see in the next few years as something that you'd like to see accomplished through your role, as God using you as His instrument in the General Treasurer Office?
I think it's something we kind of touched on early on. Is our point of focus is what would God be calling us to do as a denomination, and in order to make Christ-like disciples in the nations? How would we prioritize? How would, because we can't be everything to all people. I really think from an organizational standpoint, we have to be able to prioritize how the Lord is, figure out how the Lord is calling us to go about making Christ-like disciples in the nations, and do that. And then how do we fund that? How do we use our limited resources to satisfy what typically unlimited needs and wants from a ministry standpoint? Because we'd love to be doing everything we can, but I suppose how do we allow God to grow those resources in us too? How do we allow God to bless us? Is there anything we can do that there's anything that we are doing that blocks His blessing from us? And not that He would withhold a blessing, but how do we go about, I think, again, satisfying those unlimited ministry needs and wants with limited resources?
Well, Keith, it was a pleasure. Thank you for taking this time out of your schedule to be with us. So,
Thank you very much.
yeah. Are the Chiefs going to win the Super Bowl again this year?
I don't know, man. I'm pretty sad. I got to tell you, I'm old enough to remember Super Bowl IV in 1969-70 season. And so I waited 50 years to get one. And I have a heart for people who might be Bills fans or Detroit fans because they've never experienced the Super Bowl win. But I never thought we'd see another one in my lifetime. And so we've had
Yeah.
3 in the last 5 years. And so I'm pretty satisfied.
You feeling pretty blessed right
Yeah,
now.
I don't want to get greedy, but I don't know if anybody can do 3 in a row. But
Yeah.
we're pretty privileged to have some pretty good football around here right now. So
Yeah, that would be big for Detroit and Buffalo. That'd be the Battle of Lake Erie, I think, if I'm thinking of my geography correctly. So
that's right.
we'll see if something like that happens. So,
Yep.
well, Keith, thank you. Thanks again for being with us. We appreciate that.
No problem. Thank you, Nate. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the Holiness Today podcast. If you enjoyed this production and wish to hear more, visit holinesstoday.org/podcast or find us on Spotify, Apple, and Google Podcasts.